Lauren Taylor was only 16 years old when 31-year-old cop Samuel Sierra Adam Provon forced himself on her. Years after the attack, Lauren's testimony was key in putting Provon behind bars. Samuel Sierra took his predatory behavior to the next level by violently forcing himself on his wife while he choked her in their home. Cops and other law enforcement agents are meant to serve and protect, but what happens when they abuse their power? Their actions lead to deep emotional and physical scars, and in some cases, death. Let's check out some of these stories. Josie Porter. Josie Porter, once a trusted member of the Hernando Police Department, now stands as the face of betrayal and abuse of power within the law enforcement community. Porter's career, which was supposed to be dedicated to upholding the law and protecting the community, took a dark turn when he was charged with misconduct and maltreatment against women. These charges not only stripped him of his badge, but also shattered the trust placed in him by the public and his colleagues. Porter served as a school resource officer, a role that involves working closely with students and staff to ensure a safe and secure educational environment. However, during the time of the alleged incident, Porter was on duty, a fact confirmed by DeSoto County District Attorney Matthew Barton. The details of where the incident occurred remain undisclosed, adding an air of mystery and concern to the already troubling allegations. The charges against Porter are severe, encompassing both intimate misconduct and maltreatment. In the wake of these allegations, Porter made the decision to turn himself into authorities. Unfortunately, Porter isn't the only officer who was accused of maltreating children, as you'll see shortly. Adam Provon. Adam Provon, a former police officer, has become a notorious figure due to his heinous crimes, which have left a lasting scar on the victims and the community. His case is particularly disturbing because it involves the betrayal of trust on multiple levels, including the violation of a fellow officer and the manipulation of a vulnerable teenager. In 2010, Provon orchestrated a deceitful plan to lure a 16-year-old girl named Lauren Taylor. He met Taylor and presented himself as a young, trustworthy police officer, claiming to be 22 years old when, in reality, he was 31. This calculated deception was the first step in his predatory scheme. Taylor said Provon took her on a date, which quickly turned into a nightmare. He drove her to a remote area of woodland in Romford, East London. Once isolated, Provon revealed his true intentions, subjecting Taylor to a terrifying ordeal. A jury unanimously convicted him of 8 counts of. These charges included the assaults on both the female police officer and Lauren Taylor. He got slammed with 16 years imprisonment with an extended license of 8 years. While Provon faced good jail time for his wrongs, the next officer managed to avoid full accountability. Aaron Ruiz. Aaron Ruiz, a former police officer, has become a symbol of betrayal and abuse of power within the law enforcement community. While on duty, Ruiz pulled over a 23-year-old woman during a routine traffic stop. This encounter, which should have been a straightforward interaction, quickly turned into a nightmare for the victim. Instead of upholding his duty to protect, Ruiz exploited his position of authority to commit a heinous act of violence. He forced himself on the woman. The gravity of Ruiz's actions cannot be overstated. As a police officer, he held a position of power and authority, which he used to manipulate and harm a vulnerable individual. Ruiz's actions not only devastated the life of his victim, but also undermined public trust in the police force. Following his arrest, Ruiz faced legal proceedings that culminated in a significant sentence. He was convicted of obstruction of justice and violation of civil rights. However, he was able to escape conviction for forcing himself on the civilian, a verdict many found controversial. Just like Ruiz, the next victim on the list was charged with gross misconduct against women. Daniel Basil. Daniel Basil, a Rockford police officer, found himself at the center of a disturbing case that has raised serious questions about the integrity and conduct of those in law enforcement. Charged with criminal sexual assault, Basil's actions have caused serious problems for the police department. The incident in question occurred while Basil was off duty. According to reports, Basil sexually assaulted an adult female victim at the 700 block of Regan. The victim, a 23-year-old woman, was allegedly maltreated by Basil after he drove her home from a bar. In response to the accusations, Basil was placed on paid administrative leave pending the outcome of his criminal case. Basil's eventual arrest marked a significant turning point in the case, as it brought to light the serious nature of the allegations against him. He tried to maintain his innocence, but the odds were stacked against him. Basil's paid for his crimes, but it was nothing compared to what the next predator on this list paid after he forced a woman to engage in oral sodomy during a traffic stop. Daniel Ken Holtzclaw. Daniel Ken Holtzclaw, a former patrol officer with the Oklahoma City Police Department, is now known for one of the worst police abuse cases in recent history. Holtzclaw's crimes came to light following a particularly disturbing incident involving a woman named Janie Ligens. During a routine traffic stop, Holtzclaw abused his authority in the most reprehensible way. He forced Ligens to perform oral sex on him. What makes this incident even more alarming is the calculated execution. He failed to report the traffic stop to police dispatch and did not run a records check back on the driver to cover his tracks and avoid detection. The investigation into Holtzclaw's actions revealed a pattern of predatory behavior, with multiple victims coming forward to share their harrowing experiences. Holtzclaw was ultimately convicted on 18 charges, including first-degree sexual battery, indecent exposure, stalking, and forcible oral sodomy. The jury's recommendation for Holtzclaw to serve 263 years in prison reflected the gravity of his offenses and the impact on his victims. Just like Holtzclaw, the next officer on this list forced himself on a woman while inspecting her injuries after a physical assault case. Nathan Nash. Nathan Nash, a former Spokane police officer, is yet another cop who abused his power. Nash's crimes came to light following the courageous testimonies of his victims, who bravely recounted their harrowing experiences. A jury convicted Nash of forcing himself on 2 women. One of the victims testified about an incident that occurred in July 2019. She recounted how Nash, under the guise of examining bruising on her leg from a physical assault, violated her trust in the most despicable way. While pretending to assess her injuries, Nash inserted his hand into her underwear. He then pushed her onto the couch and forced himself on her. Nash was eventually convicted of second-degree with aggravating circumstances. The aggravating circumstances highlight the violation of trust that Nash committed as a law enforcement officer, exploiting his position of authority to manipulate and harm those he was meant to protect. During the legal proceedings, the focus remained on supporting the victims and ensuring that justice is served. While Nash committed these atrocities in uniform, the next officer did this while he was off duty. Ganter, an off-duty city police officer, found himself embroiled in controversy following a road rage incident that escalated into violence. This incident, captured on dash camera video, has not only affected his career but ruined the reputation of the police force in Enfield. What began as a verbal dispute quickly escalated into physical violence, with Ganter punching the man in the face. The dash camera footage, which captured the altercation, shows the escalation of the situation, with Ganter resorting to violence just seconds after the argument began. Following the incident, Ganter was arrested, a development that had significant repercussions for his career. At the time, Ganter was serving as a Meriden School Resource Officer, a position that requires a high level of trust and responsibility. His arrest led to his removal from this role. In addition to his arrest, Ganter faced disciplinary action from his department. An internal affairs investigation was conducted to assess the incident and Ganter's behavior. As a result, he was disciplined with a 5-day unpaid suspension, a penalty many believe didn't fit the crime. Ganter acted out in rage, but the next officer on this list took advantage of another officer in a vulnerable situation. Enis. Gordon Enis, a former Spokane police sergeant, has become a notorious figure due to his reprehensible actions that have left a lasting impact on his victim and the community. The incident that led to Enis's downfall occurred on October 25, 2015, at a house party in Colbert. The victim, a fellow police officer, attended the party and became intoxicated, eventually passing out. It was during this vulnerable state that Enis took advantage of her, committing an act of sexual violence that would have profound and lasting effects. When the victim awoke, she found Enis penetrating her with his fingers. A jury convicted Enis of second-degree. Enis was sentenced to 84 months in prison, equivalent to a 7-year term, with credit for time served. The jury only deliberated for 2 hours before slamming Enis with the guilty verdict. During his sentencing, he apologized for the pain, the cost, and how his actions affected his family and friends. Enis showed remorse for what he did, and he accepted his fate. The next cop on our list, however, committed this grave offense against his own wife and didn't feel sorry for it. Samuel Sierra, an off-duty New York City police officer, became embroiled in a deeply troubling case that involved domestic violence and abuse of power within the ranks of law enforcement. The incident in question occurred in the early hours of the morning, around 5 a.m., inside Sierra's home in Harlem. It was here that Sierra allegedly committed a heinous act of violence against someone close to him, his wife. According to reports, Sierra held his wife's arms above her head, pinning her down as he her. This act of violence was compounded by allegations of strangulation, with Sierra allegedly choking his wife during the assault. Sierra's arrest in Manhattan on charges marked a significant development in the case, bringing to light the serious nature of the allegations against him. The charges of rape and strangulation reflect the gravity of his actions and the profound violation of trust inherent in his role as a law enforcement officer. His case was just as bad as the next incident on this list about an officer who killed a woman in cold blood after she called the authorities. Sean Patrick Grayson. Sean Patrick Grayson, a 30-year-old deputy of the Sangamon County Sheriff's Office in Woodside Township near Springfield, Illinois, United States, is known for his abuse of power. Grayson's career in law enforcement spanned across 6 different Illinois police departments between 2020 and 2024, a period marked by a series of troubling incidents. However, it was the tragic killing of a woman named Sonia Massey that brought his actions into the harsh spotlight of public scrutiny. The incident unfolded in a manner that seemed almost surreal. Grayson, responding to a call, encountered Massey in a situation that quickly escalated beyond control. Reports indicate that Grayson ordered Massey to drop a pot of boiling water she was holding. The details of what transpired next are chilling and tragic. Grayson, in a decision that would forever alter the course of his life and end Massey's, fired his weapon 3 times. The bullets struck Massey, with one hitting her in the head, resulting in her untimely death. Many believe the crime was racial motivated. Unfortunately, Grayson wasn't the only officer who hurt a civilian in a racially motivated attack, as you'll see shortly. Sergeant Joseph Gibson. Sergeant Joseph Gibson became known for excessive force and abuse of power following a shocking incident that left a 71-year-old man, Leach Vu, with a broken neck. The encounter began with a non-injury traffic accident, a situation that typically involves the exchange of information and perhaps a citation. However, the situation took a dramatic turn when an argument erupted between Gibson and Vu over a traffic ticket. The body cam footage, later released by the police, provides a stark visual account of the events that transpired. The footage shows Vu, a frail elderly man, touching Gibson during the argument. This gesture was met with an aggressive response from Gibson, who proceeded to slam Vu to the ground with excessive force. The impact of the fall was catastrophic for Vu, resulting in a broken neck. The footage, which quickly circulated in the media, served as a damning piece of evidence against Gibson. In the wake of the incident, Gibson was charged in Oklahoma County with 1 count of aggravated misconduct and battery. Unlike Gibson, who attacked a man during a traffic infraction, the next police officer attacked victims who called him. Andrew Selby. Andrew Selby, a former Lancaster police officer, is another person who broke the law by attacking a civilian. His case, rooted in a series of maltreatment cases dating back to the late 1990s, has resurfaced to haunt him. Selby, once tasked with upholding the law, instead used his position to exploit and victimize those he was sworn to protect. The most harrowing of Selby's crimes occurred in December of 1997, when he forced himself on a 16-year-old girl he was investigating. This heinous act was not an isolated incident, but part of a broader pattern of predatory behavior that spanned several years. The charges against Selby were extensive and damning, and all had something to do with his maltreatment of women. Selby's actions have left a trail of trauma and devastation in their wake. The victims, many of whom were vulnerable and seeking protection, were instead subjected to horrific maltreatment at the hands of someone they believed they could trust. The fact that Selby was able to perpetrate these crimes over an extended period without detection points to significant failures in oversight and reporting within the department. As if this case wasn't bad enough, the next officer on our list engaged in both witness tampering and maltreatment. Sean Cortez. Sean Cortez, a name now marred by scandal and misconduct, is yet another example of a law enforcement officer who grossly abused his power. The events surrounding Cortez's misconduct unfolded on May 17, 2023, when he arrested a woman and discovered narcotics in her possession. However, instead of following protocol, Cortez chose to tamper with the evidence by pouring out a portion of the recovered narcotics. The case led to significant outrage on social media and the victim's community. The woman, whose identity remains protected, made shocking allegations against Cortez. She claimed that while in custody at a holding facility, Cortez coerced her into performing oral intercourse on him in the restroom. This claim is a clear and reprehensible abuse of power, highlighting a severe breach of trust and duty. Cortez's arrest and subsequent charges of sexual assault at the Windrest police station made him a disgrace to the force. Unfortunately, Cortez isn't the only one who attacked a woman he was supposed to be protecting, as you'll see in our next entry. Fileman Perez. Fileman Perez, a Texas police officer, is at the center of a deeply troubling case that highlights the potential for abuse of power within law enforcement. Perez stands accused of forcing himself on a woman he was supposed to protect. The incident in question occurred when Perez, while on duty, escorted a drunk woman to her home. What should have been a simple act of assistance quickly turned into a nightmare for the victim. According to allegations, Perez took advantage of the woman's vulnerable state, allegedly her in her own home. He reportedly continued until Perez was was interrupted by a police call, which forced him to cease his attack. The fact that Perez allegedly only stopped due to an external interruption highlights the severity of his actions and the abuse of his position of authority. The issuance of a warrant for Perez's arrest marked a significant step in the pursuit of justice for the victim. In a move that suggests an acknowledgement of his wrongdoing, Perez turned himself into authorities. Perez's case was disheartening, and it cost him his freedom, but the next officer only lost his job. Matthew Deas. Matthew Deas, a former officer with the La Mesa Police Department, became a central figure in a misconduct case. His actions during an encounter with a man named Johnson led to unjust outcomes and a breach of public trust. It all started when Johnson, an innocent bystander, was simply waiting for his friends. What should have been an uneventful moment quickly escalated into a confrontation when Deas approached Johnson in a display of unwarranted aggression. Deas grabbed Johnson by the shirt and forcibly pushed him into a seated position. The situation deteriorated further when Deas proceeded to falsely arrest Johnson, despite the absence of any wrongdoing on Johnson's part. This false arrest was a gross violation of Johnson's rights and highlighted a troubling pattern of behavior that has become all too familiar in cases of police misconduct. The actions of Deas were not only unjust, but also indicative of a broader issue within law enforcement regarding the misuse of power. In the aftermath of the incident, the city took decisive action by firing Deas from his position. Deas lost his job for his wrongdoing, but the next correctional officer and his co-workers didn't just lose their jobs. Sergeant Glenn Trombley. The case of Sergeant Glenn Trombley and his fellow correctional officers, Michael Along, Michael Fisher, and Matthew Gallagher, is being tragic. Their actions during a brutal and fatal attack on an inmate named Robert Brooks led to serious outrage. It all happened in a prison in central New York, where Brooks, a handcuffed and shackled inmate, was subjected to a vicious beating by the correctional officers. The attack, which was recorded by their body cameras, revealed the shocking extent of the brutality inflicted upon Brooks. The footage shows the officers punching and kicking Brooks in the groin and chest. They literally beat him to death for imaginary offenses. Their actions have sparked outrage and condemnation from the public and advocacy groups who demand justice for Brooks and accountability for those involved. In response to the incident, Governor Kathy Hochul took decisive action by ordering the termination of the 14 corrections employees involved in Brooks's death. The investigation into the death of Brooks is still ongoing and would most likely lead to significant jail time for the officers involved. Unfortunately, Brooks's death isn't the only civilian who lost his life in the hands of law enforcers. Emmett Martin III. The case involving Emmett Martin III and 4 other ex-Memphis officers is a harrowing example of police brutality and the abuse of power, culminating in the tragic death of Tyre Nichols. This incident, which began as a routine traffic stop on January 7, 2023, quickly escalated into a fatal encounter. Emmett Martin III, along with Desmond Mills Jr., Tadarius Bean, Demetrius Haley, and Justin Smith, were involved in the brutal beating of Tyre Nichols. The officers punched, kicked, and hit Nichols, actions that were not only excessive, but also lethal. This assault, carried out under the guise of law enforcement, resulted in Nichols's tragic death. The legal repercussions for Martin and his colleagues have been significant. They were found guilty of witness tampering. Additionally, they are facing second-degree murder charges in Tennessee State Court. The impact of Nichols' death extends beyond the courtroom. His family has filed a lawsuit against the city of Memphis, seeking $550 million in damages. The public outcry in response to Nichols's death has been heartbreaking, to say the least, as relatives fight for justice. The next case on our list was also most likely racially motivated, like the case of Tyre Nichols and many other cases of police brutality in the United States. Ben Harris. The last case on our list involved Ben Harris and the violent arrest of Tyron McAlpin, which was racially motivated. Tyron McAlpin found himself at the center of a nightmare when he was falsely accused of assault by another suspect. This accusation, which was later proven to be unfounded, set off a chain of events that would lead to a brutal encounter with law enforcement. Officers, including Ben Harris and Kyle Sue, responded to the call and proceeded to arrest McAlpin. However, the manner in which they conducted the arrest was anything but standard procedure. Harris and Sue, instead of approaching the situation with caution and professionalism, resorted to violence. They repeatedly punched and tasered McAlpin, actions that were not only excessive, but also unwarranted given the circumstances. Thanks to the body cam footage released by the department, McAlpin's lawyer was able to build a solid case against the officers involved. This use of force was a clear violation of McAlpin's rights and highlighted a troubling pattern of behavior that has become all too familiar in cases of police misconduct. The brutal arrest of McAlpin drew swift condemnation from community leaders and advocacy groups. Andre Miller, vice president of the Arizona State Conference NAACP, was vocal in his criticism. While Harris was proven guilty, the next officer on this list was able to get a lighter charge with a plea deal. Eric Thurman. Rockford police officer Eric Thurman pleaded guilty to disorderly conduct, a Class C misdemeanor, as part of a plea agreement. This charge was significantly less severe than the original charges he faced, which included criminal sexual assault and unlawful restraint, carrying a potential sentence of 4 to 15 years in prison and lifetime registration as a sex offender. The incident in question occurred on May 23, 2019, when Thurman, then 28, was accused of assaulting a 26-year-old woman while off duty near Hill and North 2nd Streets. He was placed on paid administrative leave the next day and pleaded not guilty to the charges on November 19, 2019. As a result of the plea agreement, Thurman resigned from the Rockford Police Department within 5 days, could not serve in law enforcement in Illinois for 1 year, and completed 50 hours of community service. He was also sentenced to 6 days in jail, with credit for 3 days already served and another 3 days for good behavior. Thurman's attorney, Aaron Buscemi, expressed satisfaction with the plea agreement, insisting that his client was not guilty of misconduct. The next cop, on the other hand, didn't stand a chance to get a reduced sentence. David Carrick. David Carrick, once a respected officer within the Metropolitan Police, is now infamous as an English serial rapper. As a police officer, he was entrusted with the safety and protection of the public, a role that he perverted to exploit and harm those he was meant to safeguard. Carrick's tactics involved preying on women he met through popular dating sites, such as Badoo and Tinder. He often targeted women in Hertfordshire, using his position as a police officer to gain their trust. By flaunting his badge, he created an illusion of safety and authority, making his victims feel secure in his presence. This manipulation of trust was a key element in his ability to lure women into vulnerable situations. Once he had gained their confidence, Carrick's true nature emerged. He subjected his victims to horrific acts of violence and control, abusing the power dynamics at play. His crimes were not just limited to physical assaults, they extended to psychological torment and coercion. Carrick was arrested and pleaded guilty to a staggering 85 serious offenses regarding his maltreatment of women. Thanks for watching. Please check out the other cards on the screen.